Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We are very happy to have here the 4 artists who are going to work and do projects at Vizcaya in the next 2 years, and to talk with them and with you about this contemporary art program that we're having at Vizcaya. And I would like to introduce them first. Ernesto Oroza, who's sitting next to me, will have his project opening at Vizcaya at the beginning of March. Francesco Simeti, next to Ernesto, will have his project opening next Basel Art Fair in December. Meredith Johnson, who will discuss with us, is the curator, one of the 2 curators of Creative Time, as he is in our advisory committee of our program. Josiah McElheny, who's sitting next to Naomi, will have his project in the winter of 2012. And Naomi Fisher will start her project in April and then will continue in the fall. I just would like to, if this is going up, no, the PowerPoint will start. I would just like to say very briefly a few things about what Vizcaya is and why we thought of, actually somebody before me thought of doing this, having contemporary artists to engage with the place. Vizcaya is an historic house that has it's a design of it. An historic house here in Miami, right on the shore of Biscayne Bay, that was built right before the First World War by a very rich retired businessman, and he is very flamboyant decorator called Paul Shalfin, who designed a sort of fantastic reinterpretation of Baroque and Rococo architecture, completed with formal gardens, statuary, grottos, fantasies, and so on and so forth. The place has a very eclectic collection, has a very eclectic architecture, and what was very interesting for us, also because we're undergoing a vast restoration project and transformation of us as an institution, was to engage artists to rethink what we are doing at Vizcaya with us, so rethinking from their perspective and their point of view. The premise of the program is to invite artists who can engage with the collection, with the site, with the place in some sort of unpredictable and unexpected way. And also, though, the premise is to invite artists for whom this place can engage with their practice and with their long-term career. In our advisory committee, we have Rina Carvajal, who is here today, who also was instrumental in putting a lot of things together with us last year, and Meredith Johnson and Pieranna Cavalchini, Hamza Walker. And I would really like at this point to give the mic, what do you give? The mic, the word, the speak to the, to the artist and introduce them very briefly and ask them what was their, when we invited them, what was their primary idea and sort of what made them click when they saw the place Vizcaya. Ernesto, would you like to say something about this?
My project.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hear me?
Sí.
Okay. I'm making 2 projects for Vizcaya. The first one is...
Yeah, go.
Okay. The first one is a map. I'm making a map for Vizcaya, for no cartographic map, but a conceptual map, putting in relationship different levels of idea about materials, technology, or gadget wanderings. And another side of the map has a pattern, and the people can take the map on his house and made a wallpaper in his house, taking the image of the surface of the Vizcaya. And the second project, I taking from YouTube the video that the people make at Vizcaya, quinceañeras, tourists, and I collecting the video and I try to get back the video to the space of the museum. It's okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm making a book too. It's the third project. I'm writing about different ideas around the Vizcaya, like the models of a little city, or models of archetype of living. Then there is 3 projects. We can talk later if you want about that.
And Francesco, what?
Well, Ernesto seems to be very clear on what he wants to do. I can say that I have the same situation. In the past, I've been working quite a bit with site-specific places, historic houses, and using wallpaper and various decorative languages to develop my work. And I'm assuming that that's one of the reasons I was invited to work at Vizcaya, but once I got there, I got a little bit overwhelmed by how rich it is and how many decorative languages are already in place that I had to I felt like I needed to switch direction. And so I'm very pleased to take on this challenge, and I'm going to be working on the idea of nature and landscape. Using Vizcaya to explore ideas of wilderness, probably in the gardens or in the swimming pool. But this is a very, very general idea of what I will be doing, but hopefully I'll be able to say some more later.
Josiah, what?
I just had the incredible luck that when I was invited to come see Vizcaya, it perfectly fit in with a project that I've been working on for the past 2 or 3 years that involves films, sculptures, and performances, and books that I've been doing, all surrounding a strange short story that was written in 1912. And when I first got the material about Vizcaya and then went down to visit it, it was as if they had built Vizcaya as a set for my project. So the project is very briefly is a story about a group of people who meet in Jakarta in 1909 at a fake European palace, and they there decide to start a club to build a spa to bathe in light at the bottom of a mine shaft. And so at Vizcaya, my plan is to take advantage of a whole series of wonderful coincidences in relationship to the Vizcaya's connection to early history of film, and as well as the original documentation, the extensive photographic documentation of the place, and then in a corollary to the fact that it's used now all the time as a kind of set for people to take pictures of their coming out or what have you, I'm not sure the correct term. So I'm going to then do a shoot in period costumes, in still pictures, and blend that together into a film with this original documentation of the building of Vizcaya, all surrounded by this story. So, thank you.
And Naomi?
Cool. I'm really thrilled to be starting my project soon as well. For me, what really inspired me originally to do the kind of work that I'm going to be doing at Vizcaya was a different invitation to do a project at Vizcaya for the Artist Ball a few years back. And that was the first time that I experimented with performance. And that was really came out of the fact that I grew up in Miami and have been coming to Vizcaya my entire life. And that its setting is basically what I thought a princess lived like, what I thought luxury was, like in this way that I had no access to living in Miami otherwise. I went there for art field trips growing up, Renaissance festivals, Isadora Duncan dance performances, all sorts of things. So I felt all these memories about the place and things that already are a part of my artwork. So I've been trying to create performances and create narratives that are pretty free-form that deal with that. And this work I've been doing a lot in collaboration with other people who are performers. I'm really happy Jesse, one of the performers in the past ones and who's going to be in the Vizcaya project, is here at the talk today. And really, I can't wait. I'm writing the script right now, going to be doing a live performance and shooting some video in April, and we'll have the finished project there in September.
And Meredith, you are, you work with commissions and commission projects in very different contexts, and you know all the projects. We discussed them together in our advisory committee, and a year later we are and they're working. So what does this inspire you to say or comment on?
Well, what I think is really interesting about Vizcaya is exactly what you were saying, is the weight of history there. It's both a weight and a kind of swimming pool to dive into of history. And so I find, each of the artists on this panel has a very different practice and in a very different way that they approach research. And research is obviously a component to all of your projects. I mean, what I would ask everybody is, how did you even begin to dive into the history of Vizcaya? What was your approach? Did you have to kind of immerse yourself in it, keep it on the periphery as you focused on your projects? The thing about commissioning is it's a process, and that process changes throughout the months and years that you work on something. So I'd love to hear from everybody how you even dove into that at Vizcaya. I'll start with Naomi, since you live in Miami and you were familiar with Vizcaya already.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have an extraordinary luck with this because it's been in my consciousness since I was a kid. So, I mean, for me, yeah, it's such an interesting process. And, just what you just said about is it on the periphery? Are you researching? For me, it's a combination of both. And I've been doing these series of performance-based works, so knowing that I'm going to be doing one at Vizcaya helps me lead towards it. And the piece that I'm doing right now, I'm like, as I'm editing it, as I'm working on it, I'm seeing where the next step is, because I kind of look at these projects as a series in a way, and yeah, so it's constantly in my head. I'm constantly trying to figure out. I keep writing things down. I have like all these notebooks and notes just filled with like, oh, this is an image, oh, this is a scene, like whether it's just a sentence, a paragraph. And as they build up, I keep referring to them. And when I'm finished with this project, I'm going to really finish writing the script or the loose structure for what I'm doing at Vizcaya. So it's a combination of research, just letting things bubble up, and just keeping track of it all and letting it add together.
And Josiah, you mentioned that it really fit into something that you were already thinking of and imagining. How has it shifted now that you've been spending time at Vizcaya and you're going through the archive at Vizcaya?
Well, I guess that for me that it feels connected to this American idea of history, which is a kind of an invented history. I mean, I think that most Europeans or people from South America would hardly find Vizcaya historic. I mean, it's an imagination of history more than it is history in some sense. But I find that really inspiring, because I think that this notion of that history is ours, and that how we conduct ourselves in politics or in art today is we can use history to think about today, and the kind of permission that Vizcaya was based on, the kind of crazy ability to put things together that shouldn't be put together, and to reinvent things that incorrectly and correctly. I think it's something that I feel a lot of affinity to as an artist and how I work.
And Francesco, how did you even start at Vizcaya? Did you have a plan before coming here of how you were going to conduct your research, or did you just kind of dive right in?
I did not have a plan. It started with a visit, and immediately I was drawn into the building, into the interiors, into the decorations, and all the stuff that it's in Italian you would say pane per i miei denti. It's my the practice of my work, taking off decorative languages and twist them and change the contents of the story. But in Vizcaya, as I was saying, something else happened, and I started more and more being attracted by the exteriors and the garden, and then delving into the archives, into the photographs of the archive, and starting seeing things that they're not really obvious. Starting seeing how Vizcaya was chosen specifically for its placement on the landscape and the nature around it. And then once that spot was selected, the whole place was turned upside down. It was destroyed, basically, in order to create another landscape that was at the same time that had to look spontaneous as well. And that really started triggering. As I said, I'm not really quite sure how this is all going to develop, but in the actual piece that I will be making there. But I've been really, really fascinated by that, and I've been reading, just exploring the idea of wilderness, and which seems to be a very artificial mindset in a way. And so I've been doing a lot of site-specific before, a lot of commissions, but this one, there's something different. I don't think I've had to, it seems like I do have to do a lot of research, and I'm very, very excited by this this new direction that my work has been taking.
And to kind of extend on that with Ernesto, your project with mapping can be both incredibly tangible but also very abstract. And so how do you, in mapping a place that's a kind of created environment, a fantasy of Deering that is already a layer upon a layer, what is your center point or your entrance point into mapping that place?
Yeah, I find in Vizcaya two levels of construction of building. Mm-hmm. The shelving, the interior design, that the designer, he was making a house for Deering, but at the same time he was making a display for him. He was showing on the floor, on the wall, on different furniture, like he was building a little fair, a little display for shows his work and take money, new clients. The Vizcaya has two levels. For me, it was very, very impressive the first time, because my background is the interior designer too, I'm furniture designer. And I feel the pragmatism and the shelving idea. He was using pragmatic way of the building for him. And I know now everybody uses the building in the same way. The people, the quinceañeras, for instance, go to the building. I use the Vizcaya like the background only for make to personal memory or family memory. I have both this dual perception of the building. And my map is about that. It's about dual perception of the like house, like display, decorate, or ambience. Okay?
If I can say something about the process that the artists is really exciting for us, and for me in particular too, because we all kind of came to Vizcaya at the same time. I mean, I came a year before, and we engaged you and first. And really there's what all you're saying about the research of the place, and what you, Josiah, were saying about an historic place that is completely invented, and a nature that is destroyed and reconstructed to be natural, a house that is showing off and somehow a showroom rather than a real place, are all things that really are really central to the way we look at the collection and to the way we try to understand the collection. So I think that when we say that we take advantage of the artists working at Vizcaya, it's a really practical thing. I mean, it's not just a abstract thing of, we are nourished by their artistic, look on. It's very practical for us in order to understand a place that is constructed and was constructed as a fantasy. So how do you understand a fantasy? How do you understand the way a fantasy operates and operates, in the community or for the public? That is really what this project is, adding to what we're doing. I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Well, I wanted to ask you how, when you're leading artists through and you're kind of envisioning the commissioning program, the thing that strikes me about Vizcaya every time I go there is how, we've touched a little bit upon this, of the wildness, that a lot of historic houses are in very manicured places. Vizcaya is manicured, but it's also in a mangrove. So it's very, nature is kind of constantly trying to overtake it, and there's this kind of push and pull between the natural and the constructed. So how, on the curatorial side, do you approach that in an always shifting environment?
Praying that hurricanes don't come while we're there. Putting up shrines. No, on the curatorial side, and that is something that everybody here noticed. It was a place that was built in order to look old immediately. So it was a place that was built in order to look old, in order not to look what it is, So when we're working with all of the artists, our idea of displaying and showing the project is to show something that doesn't merge necessarily to engage with practices that do not mock the decoration, but that take you away from that, to take, like Ernesto is doing, visitors at a different level, to add further dimensions to that place. But really, I don't know, for us the process is as important as the final project, I think. And I think that for all the artists, Naomi, for you, how different is it to do a performance and a film in different locations? How is Vizcaya different from other wilderness that you worked on in South Florida?
It's very different, and in some ways that's part of my challenge with that, because a lot of my work has happened more in pure nature that doesn't interact with human intervention. And for me, I really appreciate what everyone's talking about, the overtaking of nature of the place and how it's constantly like the roots are about to climb over the rocks and like eat the building. Because for me, even just in Florida, that's one of the things that I'm so inspired by within nature here. And for me, it's very exciting to get to directly explore that confrontation. And it's like, I'm so excited about the house and the architecture, but how it slips into the garden. We've talked before about how they used to have a beach that you would hike to from there that we don't even know where it is anymore. Like, does it exist? Is it gone, And this isn't one of the more historic aspects of there. It was maybe, I think we've talked about this too, that maybe this was only in the 70s, but they had a garden for the blind.
Yes.
So they also had a garden that was really about scent. So there were just all these different ways to experience nature, the landscape, and how you as a human relate to it, and how can you even relate to it if you're blind, which to me is so completely amazing. Even just like how other stories about how he was a fascinating combination of being a preservationist and like tearing it down, because there were some areas where you couldn't put the road there because there was a tree there and you had to protect the tree. But then other areas, they're clear cut and making these like precious gardens. So it's just this like, even just the contradictions that you deal with in everyday in life. Like, you want to keep these ideals, but then you want to keep your fantasy, and how do you negotiate the two?
Yes.
And I think just like thinking how you live your daily life and how it can be amplified in like a major way in a place like Vizcaya, to me, is what's really fascinating.
Yes, as anybody in the public have any questions, we can open up. Yes.
Yes, I grew up in Naomi in Miami Beach, and I can recall myself visiting. I grew up in Miami Beach, and every time I come here, I make what I call a spiritual pilgrimage to Vizcaya. I have a completely different reaction to everything I've heard. But what I appreciate, every time I go there, I go on a tour, I always learn something new, but I never get this kind of feedback. It's wonderful to have people exposed for the first time to Vizcaya. I don't agree with I have completely different reaction, but just the opportunity to hear other people's experience of Vizcaya, I found to be very rewarding. I'm deeply grateful for the discussion.
Hi. I'm just curious a little bit. I'd like to hear more about the process of choosing the artists. I mean, because I guess you're not putting in proposals. The artists aren't putting in
No.
You meet with them first, and
No,
then
no.
they...
The process of choosing the artists, we have an advisory committee, and the members of the advisory committee are Rina Carvajal, Meredith Johnson, who's sitting with us, and Rina too. Hamza Walker, who's the curator of the Renaissance Society in Chicago, and Pieranna Cavalchini, who's the curator of contemporary art at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. Four very different curators who work in very different domains and in very different, so that was the idea of having. All of them propose a number of artists, and we meet once a year, or once every 18 months. We've already just met once so far, to discuss all the artists that they bring for. We discuss them all for 2 days, and we identify 4 plus 2. And the idea is really to identify artists that will say, yes, we want to do it. I mean, to not... we do not necessarily do the call for proposals because not being a contemporary art institutions, we wouldn't really be able to accommodate a much more complex situation and dynamic that is a call for proposal. But we're definitely open, if the program becomes more permanent, to add a more open dimension to it. But the invitation is important because it's important, as we identified all of them, it's important to work with artists that even if they do something completely different, that we know that they can, the working of Vizcaya can add a shift to their practice and can resonate in larger areas of their practice. Like, for example, Ernesto works with design and objects, and you wouldn't be an artist that you think, okay, he's right for that place, but yet he is. So that's the curatorial bit.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask you, I have 2 questions. One, what motivated you to decide to include a distinguished group of artists' interpretations of Vizcaya? And secondly, how did the advisory committee make the selection of artists for this project? Thank you.
Well, as we said, the motivation began before I came, and was really Joel Zoffman and Richard Massey and some friends of the institution that wanted to bring artists at Vizcaya to work at Vizcaya. For the reasons that we said, because when they built Vizcaya in the 1910s, there already were a lot of artists working in the property, contemporary artists. And as I said, in the advisory committee, we discussed for 2 days the work of each artist, and we come up collectively at a decision. So it's a discussion that happens between 4 curators plus the director that then brings to the identification of the artist.
Yeah, and I would just say that in that process, and Rena's here, that I think all of us really really came to the table thinking about this space and thinking about the historical context of the space and the site conditions of the space. And all of the curators on the committee are all curators who work in commissioning in some way, although all of us very differently. So it really became a discussion of artistic practice and the relationship of artistic practice to this space. Which I think was a really wonderful conversation that this group grew out of. Yeah.
Thank you. I was reading that it's not a residency program. Could you talk a little bit about the funding and is it commissioned, and what resources are provided for the artists?
Yes, I forgot to thank the funders at the beginning. My apologies. Yes, the program is not a residency program. It's pretty much entirely funded through grants. The program was made possible by a multi-year grant of the Danielson Foundation and the McCormick Foundation. And then a grant of the Knight Foundation was instrumental in continuing it and enlarging it, and then both the Harpo Foundation and Stella Holmes support it. And then we do fundraising for the different projects. It's not a residency, but we usually tend to work with 2 artists who are residents in Chicago, in Miami. And no, that's another. And then we invite artists from abroad, and they come here. They stay a few days. They look at the place. We continue the conversation with them. We send them material. We kind of enter into this flow, and then we have an agreement with the artists, and we can provide them with a certain amount for the production of the work. And then we discuss with them what extra fundraising we need. We can arrive to produce up to a certain point, of course. And also we solicitate collaborations with other institutions as much as we can in order to because we're not a contemporary art institution. I think he wanted to say something, and then this lady here.
Hi, my name is William Bellinella. I just wanted to ask the question, would there be a new modern view, obviously, of an interpretation of Vizcaya with these new artists that are going to be interpreting the place?
Well, I mean, the interpretation of the artists of the place is their interpretation. Then there's a sort of institutional interpretation, which is, of course, a different thing. I mean, it's really changing. And in a way, it's also changing what the artists are showing us, what they see, like a few weeks ago, we were with Ernesto looking at the books of James Steering and with our archivist. And so that gave us the idea of doing an exhibition on the books that he had. So there is, the artists do enter into our work, and, we kind of try to have as many sort of even collective conversations, not just me, but then there's an institutional interpretation that should be a little more rigorous. Not that at a different level, on a different plane.
I was saying at Tropical Fairchild Gardens, they brought Chihuly, that really brought people out to the gardens because people wanted to see, interesting pieces of art, actually incorporated into the garden. So I could see something kind of like that imposed on Vizcaya, which is such a beautiful setting, by the way.
Well,
it's
we
beautiful.
will, yes. I guess that all the artists we work on are more into a research-based project rather than, not that what they do is not visual and decorative and beautiful, but I think what they're drawn to is a little, probably even more invisible than that. Will be visible, but is going to be quite different.
Okay, thank you.
And then there's this lady here who wanted to. Sorry, can I get that? Where? Right here?
I was interested to know what they make of the program that Chalfin used in creating Vizcaya and furnishing it.
In what sense?
Trying to create the Italian villa, the fantasy of this aristocratic or possibly aristocratic family living there over 400 years.
Well, somebody, in this case, no one is really reacting with that in particular. There are other things that are resulted more interesting to the work. We don't, each artist does whatever he wants or she wants. Other questions? No. Are we good? Yeah. Are we okay?